What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the market moving forward as we have big data coming out for tomorrow. We have the election. We're going to be looking for some interesting volatility because of it. So I'm going to break down all this information, but just know a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. Not to mention an 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon, in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about the markets. So right now, SPY saw this rejection exactly as you predicted. I mentioned everyone this could be making a lower high rate over here before it starts to dip lower. So that is what happened thus far. But so far, it is worth noting that we're seeing some buyers defending very close to the 4-hour 200 EMA around the 569 area. So far, it's trying to hold that support. There is some fear building approaching the election, so it is possible we see a little bit of a dip again. However, the real move is going to happen after the election results come out, and we're going to be looking to see if we get a big bounce or a dump, so remember to keep that in mind. So what do I see for the market moving forward? What is my personal opinion about how things are going to likely progress? The answer is I believe that this is going to depend on a lot of different factors. We do have some data coming out for tomorrow. So let's first talk about this data first, and I'll break down more details about these charts. For today, please note that we actually saw more of a red day. The majority of stocks closed in the red in the finance sector. Health technology was the same. Retail, not to mention most tech out there. We did see Nvidia trying to hold up, but it wasn't doing the best of jobs at maintaining its levels. And then other stocks like Apple, the Googles, the Metas, Microsofts, they were all selling off today, especially Amazon, after we got some bearish news. So with the market selling off the way it did, this is very, very important because there is a lot of fear that's building, but there could be a shift depending on how things end up going moving forward. So we'll have to wait for that. Right now, fear is making up the majority of sentiment. There's a lot of fear right now approaching the election. Momentum is also at fear as we're starting to see more of these sellers continuing to enter the markets. There's a lot more shorts piling in. And then also the puts and call option ratio is going up. We're seeing fear making up the majority of that as well. The majority of positions are in puts, and that's once again a big shift. The VIX remains neutral. It's just waiting for a big reaction, so we're going to be watching for tomorrow for this to finally happen. Now, what's happening tomorrow? How is tomorrow going to go? As a reminder, okay? Tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, November 5th, 2024, the first Tuesday of November, also known as Election Day in the USA. Just know that 1 hour before the market opens, we have the exports and imports data. We'll see what that leads to, but that's going to be a little bit more minor. Then there are 2 times to watch for some volatility intraday. At 9:45 a.m., we have the SP Global Composite PMI. That might lead to some interesting volatility because it'll give us more insights on how these sectors are doing. Then we have the ISM services data coming out at 10 a.m. We'll be watching to see what this leads to. We have the services business activity, new orders, and prices all coming out. So watch and see how that ends up going. It's going to be very exciting, guys. So get ready for that. But besides that, after the first 30 minutes of market open, there might not be much that happens. We just have some data coming out, and the market's going to be just getting ready for the election. But the main time to watch for volatility is going to be this. We have the presidential election results coming out. Hopefully they come out by Tuesday. Sometimes it takes some time for them to count all the votes, but the market's going to be looking for a big reaction. Now, when the results come out, I do expect there to be a lot of volatility. If we get a victory for, former President Trump, it's going to lead to an interesting amount of volatility for different sectors. We're going to see stocks like Bitcoin trying to push. We're going to be looking for others out there trying to slow down. I also want to mention that, Tesla's going to be looking for a nice run if Trump were to get a victory, and the market's going to get a more positive reaction. If Kamala Harris were to win, we could even see a positive reaction initially, but some sectors won't be as strong, such as like Bitcoin, not to mention Tesla and a few others. But other stocks like Google could still perform very well under Kamala Harris if she does get a nice win. So the initial reaction could be bullish for the markets. That is what tends to happen. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not. Just know that certain stocks may pump more or less. They may pump more or less, depending on who ends up winning. So just keep that in mind. So we'll see how it ends up going. We'll also watch to see what the overall reaction is. Obviously, they have different policies when it comes to like foreign policy, tariffs, China, taxation, the list goes on. So we'll just have to wait and see how things end up going. For other factors out there when it comes to our earnings, just know that we have Palantir basically announcing earnings after the market closes. They just announced their very important earnings, and then we also have Supermicro and a few others for tomorrow. Today, Berkshire Hathaway announced that they're holding over $300 billion in cash. That's a bigger cash hoard than before, which goes to show that they're preparing for something very, very big. Palantir, on the other hand, saw something very interesting. Their share price went up quite a bit. It's up like 11% because they had some good revenue outlooks. Let's actually talk about that in just a second. So right over here, you guys can see we actually have their EPS was a beat at 10 cents adjusted. Revenue was at 7.26 million above expectations. And overall, their revenue grew quite a bit. So they have some good guidance coming out for the full year. So that's not bad whatsoever. And that's why the share price ended up going up. So the full year guidance is not bad, as we're now foreseeing about a nice amount of growth for all of 2024 with a 2.805 to about $2.809 billion in revenue above what we were expecting before. So that's bullish news for them. And that's what's leading to, once again, some more upside. So what do we see for the other stocks out there? Just to be very, very frank with everyone, right now, SPY is looking a little bit weaker because of the fact that we got this rejection and we're making lower highs. So we're barely holding support here. We could see something similar tomorrow where we attempt to rebound, but there could be another dip back down towards the 568 area and a lot of consolidation around there. If 568 doesn't hold, however, we're at risk of coming all the way down to about 566. So we could see a small dip. I do anticipate a little pop in the morning, kind of like what we saw today. We did push just a little bit right over here before it started to dip. So look for a very similar move. A little push in the morning, then a small dip as the day goes on. And then we'll be watching to see, does the market get a big bounce by the time we get to near close, or if not by tomorrow. So if the election results come out, at least the majority of the election results come out for tomorrow, we'll be looking for a big reaction in the stock market on Wednesday. Will that lead to a bounce or pump? It all depends. So for tomorrow, make sure you look at SPY's very, very key levels. We have the 570 resistance, not to mention 562.5, followed 572.5, excuse me. Then our support is going to be at 568.5, followed by 565 below that. So I presume the most likely case is that we kind of rebound in the morning, get to the low 570 area. Then we start to slow down as the day goes on, start dipping right over here, back down to where the lows were of the day. And if those fail us, we could dip a little bit more. So just be mindful of the fact that the market's dipping. But then we'll see what happens with the very, very important earnings that are coming out. So just keep that in mind, guys. That's what's going to affect us, not to mention the election. The election is going to be a big factor as well. So wait for that. For ES, we also look a little bit more bearish right over here. Just like what we saw, we're in a range right over here. So we're looking at this 57.40 area. We could attempt to push for 57.60 before we see a rejection and dip back down towards the 57.25 area. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. But overall, it is a little bit more bearish as we had our 200 EMA rejected, came up rejected, and we're just continuing to pump and reject. If we continue to lose 57.25, we're looking for 5700 as our potential target. And if we end up pushing past 5800, we turn back to bullish. Overall, this chart is favoring downside off these rejections, so it could try to pop and then drop back down as the most likely cases. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. Look for an attempt to retest 57.60 tomorrow morning, followed by a rejection to the low 5700s as the most likely possibility. For Nvidia, we pumped, rejected, pumped again, only to reject exactly as predicted. So going into tomorrow, we might see the same thing essentially going on. We might see Nvidia attempt to push back up to about 137.5. And if it does not break above 138, we could come just short of that and start dipping back down. And there is risk of this coming back down to about the 133s, if not the 131 area. So look for a little bit of a dip to 133 on Nvidia. That's going to be the most likely case. And we'll see how things end up going from here. Just keep that in mind, guys. There is that risk of some downside. So we'll see how things end up going. So give this as much time as possible. For Bitcoin, we are a little bit more bearish. I do think it's going to try to rebound tomorrow morning for about 68,500, but we could be making a lower high and just kind of like reject right over here as well. So we'll see how things end up going. Look for a push for 68,500 and a rejection is the most likely cases, and we'll give this a little bit more time to develop. But just know this, guys, as far as the way the market is moving, there's going to be a bigger reaction after we get the election results. If Kamala Harris wins for Bitcoin specifically, we might see a little bit of a dip once her victory comes, at least initially, just an initial move. But later on during her presidency, the market would be pumping. Bitcoin would be pumping as well later on. But just for the initial reaction, it would be a little bearish if she were to win. And then if Trump were to win, we would be looking for basically a big pump on Bitcoin initially because of many of the things he said in the past. So that's going to be very important. Make sure you guys are prepared for that just to be safe. For more, we have NQ. NQ is once again selling off even more, looking more bearish, continuing to reject. We got to reclaim 20,200. Otherwise, there's a risk of dipping all the way down towards 20,000 flat or below. And then we'll see if we get a bounce or not off of that. Also look, at 20,200 as our resistance to break to turn back up. This is rejecting here, so the odds do favor kind of like a pop and a dip back down to these lows, all the way down to below 20,000 before we see a bigger reaction. So there's going to be a risk of us dipping all the way down close to 20,000 or below, and then we'll see what kind of reaction we get as time goes on, depending on the news. For the QQQ, it's the same thing essentially. It might dip a little bit more. We could be looking for a retest of 484 and then a lot of consolidation in this range. We're range bound between 484 and 490. So look for a little bit of a dip and some consolidation is the most likely phase for tomorrow. Could dip a little bit more, but then the bigger reaction is going to come once we get the election results. So just be on the lookout for that. In terms of how Apple is looking, we're very flat right now. It is trying to base around this 220 area. If we lose 220, we're looking for 218.5 as our target. And if we bounce off 222 or break through that, we're looking for 224. I presume we're going to be likely trying to retest 223, maybe a little bit under that, come back down, just kind of consolidate between 220 and 223. And if we break past 223, we're looking for 225. I believe we're going to most likely be stuck between 220 and 222. We're going to likely just be kind of shuffle in this range for some time, and then the election is going to cause a big reaction after that. So just keep that in mind. Another setup worth watching is this one right over here. I know it's tough for me to say this for some people, but the honest truth is the fact that we still have this head and shoulders like structure on NEO. If we lose 5, there's going to be a risk of tipping lower. It might push a little bit higher for the short term before it starts to dip. So just be mindful of that. If we lose 5, we will turn more bearish. And it's very close. For Netflix, we are just range bound, consolidating, waiting for the election. We could see another continuation to just shuffle around the 755 area as the most likely case. And I think that's most likely what's going to happen with this stock. So a lot of consolidation around that range is most likely what's going to be beginning. For CELH, we're kind of rejecting off this resistance, but just know we have earnings, I believe, within a day or two. We have a resistance and we have earnings, on Wednesday. So earnings comes out on Wednesday, despite the fact that we're touching this resistance. So we could be looking for a test of 31.4 and might try to bounce on tomorrow approaching its earnings. So we'll have to see if that ends up being the case. But overall, it's forming a bullish divergence trying to push up. If we break 31.5, we're looking for an attempt to get back up to 32.25. If we end up losing 30.5, we're looking for a dip back down. So this is favoring a move back up to 31.5 or above, in my personal opinion. For Palantir is looking more bullish after earnings. They had a strong outlook, so we're going to be looking for a test of about 47.5. And if we break that, we're looking for 50 as our next target. If that doesn't break, we're looking for a retest of like 45.5 right over here, which is where the breakout is. If we can't break past 47.5, but overall, it still looks more bullish to me. We have Supermicro announcing earnings tomorrow. Don't forget, guys, it's more bearish because of some bad news that came out, especially with the antitrust laws. So look at 26 as support. If we hold this, we could attempt to rebound for 27.5. But overall, we're on a stronger downtrend, so just be careful. There could be a push for 27.5 temporarily, but I wouldn't turn way too bullish yet. I'd rather wait for earnings to pan out. For others out there, we have Rivian. Rivian is just consolidating. We have earnings as well, I believe, on Thursday. I think it's on Thursday. Let me just double check that. I could be right. Yep, Thursdays when we have earnings for Rivian, just to double check that. We could attempt to push for basically 10.5 tomorrow and just see a lot of shuffling. That's all it's really doing with low volume. But then earnings is going to be one factor on Thursday, not to mention the election. We'll see if we get a big bounce or not, so just keep that in mind. For other tickers out there, we also happen to have SoFi. SoFi is dipping right here. We're going to be looking for 11 as our resistance and 10.65 as our support. If we start dipping, I do think we could be dipping to about 10.65 since we're failing to hold 11. So watch and see how things end up going. We could be looking for 10.65 just as a nice potential target. For other factors out there, we also happen to have basically the IWM. The Russell 2000 had a high here, came down, rejected, came up, rejected, came up, rejected, came up, rejected. We've got to hold above 221. Otherwise, we're at risk of coming back down to about 218.5. So I think the odds are favoring downside right back down towards those levels. For other tickers out there, we have basically AMD. AMD is looking a little bit more bearish right over here. We're looking for 144 as our resistance, not to mention the main support all the way down here towards 137.5. My gut is telling me that AMD still has more bearish downwards pressure. We could dip to about 140 flats. We'll see if it holds that or not. If not, we're looking for 137. Just be very patient to give this the time it needs, and we'll see how things end up going. For ARM, we're a little bit more bearish. We have like these rejections that just keep on perpetuating. We have 140 as resistance and our main support down here towards 135. So I'm favoring that I might be dipping a little bit lower for 135, but that depends on earnings and other factors like that. As of right now, it looks a little bit more bearish approaching the election. For others out there, such as Coinbase, we look a little bit more bearish. We've got to reclaim 190. Otherwise, we're at risk of coming back down lower for 175. Still looks kind of weak here. Might just consolidate between 176 and 180 for the majority of the day. Could dip a little bit lower, but we'll see if we get a bounce after the election. It does look like it wants to bounce. As we're seeing momentum, the bearish momentum is slowing down right now, so we'll see about that. For Amazon, we're dipping right over here. We could be looking for a test of basically 194. If that holds, Amazon might dip a little bit more than bounce. And if we lose this, we're looking for a dip to 191. I still think it's going to dip a little bit more before we see a potential bounce or a possible bounce. It depends on the election and such. Meta is more bearish, just trying to hold 559 as its supports. If we end up losing that, we're looking for 555. So we'll have to see how things end up going. For Microsoft, we're a little bit more bearish off this liquidity grab. We're still dipping quite a bit after earnings. So I think that it's trying to base off 406. So it could dip a little bit lower to that before we see an attempt to rebound. As of right now, look for a test of 406, maybe a little bit below that if that fails us. 406 to 402 are the two main supports, and we'll see if we bounce or not. For Google's more bearish as we're rejecting here. We're going to see if 170 holds. We have 172 as resistance and 170 as support. If 170 fails us, though, we're looking for basically 167. So we'll see which one ends up holding or not. With that being said, guys, that's what I'm basically anticipating. For a few more, we have DJT, which is making a very, very big move right now. We'll see if this tries to hold above 35. Approaching the election is actually pushing. So looking for 40 is our next potential target. For the VIX, we're just shuffling here. We have this gap to fill down here. Will the VIX get a rug pull after the election? Or is the VIX about to break out? It depends on the election. I'm personally starting to favor that this might actually dip a bit. The market might see a little bounce, but we'll see about that, guys. We'll have to just see just to be safe. Also, I want to mention that the 10-year is still pushing. We'll see how the election affects that. That's going to be very important for the economy. Not to mention the dollar, which is trying to push right here at 104. Will the dollar push to 104 and reject, or will it end up continuing to push? We'll just have to wait and see. With that being said, guys, I appreciate you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great day. As far as the market is going right now, we are technically more bearish. We could dip a little bit more. But could we be dumping because the market's about to see a little rally approaching the election results or right after the election results? It's always a possibility. So I'm just saying to keep that in mind, guys. I am kind of leaning a little bit more in favor of that. But just to be safe, we will have to wait and see. Excuse me. We'll just have to wait and see how things end up going. With that being said, I just want to say I really thank you guys so much for listening. Get ready for the election. It's going to be a very, very big day for every American, for the United States as a whole and the global stage. And hundreds of millions, if not billions of people are going to be watching to see who ends up winning tomorrow. So get ready. It's going to have a big effect on the stock market, in my personal opinion. Yes, there might not be as big of a reaction during the morning period. It's probably going to be a little bit later on. However, there's going to be a big reaction, I would say, maybe like once we get the results. Hopefully they come out tomorrow, because there have been some times when it takes a while for them to count everything, or maybe other factors, but which I'm not going to get into the conspiracies and things like that. So we'll see. We'll see how things end up going. And nonetheless, guys, I just remain very optimistic for the future. No matter who wins, okay, even if the market gets some kind of sell-off or not, the long term of the U.S. markets, the long term for the share prices is still bullish. We're still very bullish for the super, super long term for many years to come. The short term may have a recession, and there could be some downside for the short term, but just know that that is going to be followed by a monstrous rally no matter what, in my personal opinion, regardless of who ends up winning. All right, so we'll see how things end up going for the short-term volatility. We'll see if the market gets a big bounce or not after the election. And we'll be very, very patient nonetheless. I thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys like my new thumbnail. I'm just trying to customize them a little bit better. If you don't, just let me know down below. Like, I personally, don't mind hearing your guys' opinions. But until I see you guys again, I'll see you guys tomorrow before the market opens. Until then, please have a good night and peace out.